Good morning and welcome to the February 22nd, 2023 meeting of the Lextran Board of Directors. My name is Jill Barnett and I am the Lextran General Manager. I would like to turn the meeting over to our chair, Mr. Harding Dowell.
Thank you, Jill. We'll call the meeting to order and we will call the roll. Ms. Rogers.
Here.
Mr. Scheininger.
Here.
Dr. Capo is absent. Mr. Motley.
Here.
Mr. Ward.
Here.
Ms. Gonzalez.
Here.
Judge Thurston.
Present.
All right, we have a quorum. We'll move to any public comment today. All right, we have a full house, but let's see. We'll approve the minutes for January 2023. Has everybody had a chance to read, and is there a motion to approve?
I'll make a motion to approve the minutes.
Mr. Motley motions. Is there a second? Judge Thurston seconds. All in favor? Aye. All right, thank you. There is no chair's report, and I would like to amend the agenda to move old business to right now, the introduction of the RATP Dev GM and employee recognition.
Yes, I'd like to welcome Mr. Marlon Bates to the podium. Marlon is our General Manager for RATP Dev, the paratransit provider here in Lexington. Marlon has been on the ground with us since August, September timeframe.
Yeah, August.
But have not had the chance to formally introduce him to the Board of Directors and wanted to do that before we get into a moment of recognizing one of their employees. But Marlon, why don't you just tell the board a little bit about yourself and what your experience has been?
First of all, great to be here. Thanks for having me. As Jill said, I'm the General Manager for RATP Dev, and I've been in transit this is my 35th year. And I love it. I love it. So we're here, and as a company, we're here to try to make things better, try to work out ways to bring best practices to this location from some of our other centers. As a company, we run transit services all throughout the country and also overseas as well. But our focus is here. Our focus is here. So, in fact, our CEO, Cyril Abril, will be here tomorrow. So we are really focused on trying to raise the level of awareness for what paratransit is, and also what it isn't, but also just to do it in a way that we take safety and customer service as the forefront of everything we do. I said I've been doing it for 35 years, but it's every situation, every location is unique, right? So we bring some of the things that we have done at other locations to this one, but this contract is a separate contract, so we try to make sure that we manage that to the best of our ability, hitting the KPIs that's been identified by Lextran. I want to thank Jill and Byron and her team because they've been wonderful to work with. They've been very clear on what the direction is, what their expectations are, and have worked with us lockstep on providing service. So thank you very much. I look forward to working with you. But one of the reasons I'm here, and Jill has mentioned it, is this woman here, who's very shy, by the way. I'm trying to come around here. This is Paige Casturi. And Paige is one of our great operators who did a wonderful thing back on January the 11th. At the very start of her route, now mind you, it's 4:45, it's 5 o'clock in the morning, it's still dark out. She's driving down the road and she sees a child that's in a nightgown, barefoot, wandering in the street.
30 degrees.
30 degrees. So she could have just gone about her business and just gone to her first pickup because we put a lot of pressure on, be on time, be on time. But she did the right thing. She stopped. She immediately ran out, brought this child into a warm vehicle, called dispatch, called 911, and made sure that child was properly cared for. And it's heartwarming, but it's also concerning that why a child would be out that time of morning unsupervised. But thanks to Paige, we made sure that child got to the proper care that she needed, and I just wanted to thank her for it. So on that day, I brought it to Jill's attention, I brought it to Byron's attention, and I think Jill and I had these tearjerker moments on the phone as oh no, that was just me. It was just me. It was just
dust in our eye.
Yes, dust. But we really wanted to recognize Paige for this, and this is the type of person that we have here, and I just think that we all need to understand that there's never a bad time to do the right thing, and to just show a little bit of concern and care for someone that is in need of it. And I'm glad she was there to do that. So thank you very much. And she doesn't know what the big fuss is about. She keeps saying she doesn't know what the big fuss is about, but it's really important.
You know, on behalf of Lextran, thank you. I know you are not a Lextran employee, but you have Lextran on the side of your vehicle and on your uniform. and we're just really proud of the actions that you took. And Marlon and I wanted to present you with a certificate of commendation and bring you here for this recognition and thank you for the work that you do.
Thank you. I'm just grateful I was at the right place at the right time.
Absolutely.
So,
It's yours. That's yours.
okay, thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paige. Well, Fred, I'm sorry you have to follow that up. We'll do the performance report.
I would like to say welcome back this month
Yeah,
to
I tell
Mr.
you
Fred
what.
Combs to handle the performance report. I had to pinch it last month, knock the dust off as I told Harding. I hadn't done that in a while, so have Fred here to deliver the performance report, and we'll be glad to hear from him.
Yeah, I am really, really happy to be back. It killed me to miss a board meeting, it really did. But what I understand, it was only like 20 minutes long, so
I appreciate that dedication.
And we know if this doesn't work out, acting is in your future.
yeah. Well, happy to be back and happy to talk about our performance in January. Our mission statement, we serve people in our community with mobility solutions. And to jump into some highlights, the first bullet is about our ridership. I'm not going to talk about that right now because I want to talk about that a lot more in detail in a moment. On-time performance for fixed route increased by 0.8% for the third consecutive month. And the paratransit service on-time performance is also improved. It is up to almost 65% now, and we're seeing that trend continue to go up. A team of our employees attended the mayor's annual State of the City address held at the Central Bank Center. And I have 4 commendations to share with you from January. The first, a customer said, "I am disabled," and had a cart with me approaching the stop when the bus came. Linko Van Ev, a bus operator, waited on me and helped me onto the ramp. And I wanted to thank Patty Bird, a bus operator. I didn't know that the bus didn't accept anything over a $5 bill, and I only had a 10. She was nice and courteous enough to allow me to ride to the transit center to purchase a pass. We had 2 additional commendations for bus operators, Brutus Burton and Mark Porter, so congrats to the staff for those commendations. And I know there's a train rumbling behind me when I get to the ridership part, and I've been waiting like all month to talk about it. Yeah, awesome. Ridership was in January. We've been comparing our ridership to this monthly average, and that chart that we've been walking through every month, I've got it to share with you again. But as you see, our green line has finally blipped up above the gray line. Doesn't look like a whole lot on this slide, but it's really, really, really important to take a moment to reflect on what that actually means, as this is the first time that this has happened since before the pandemic. Paratransit side, we have seen a little bit of decrease into December, but now we're sort of seeing that bounce back into January, and we look for that trend to probably continue to improve as well. But to step back and look at this compared to those monthly averages, here it is. We have finally beaten our monthly average in a month. From the early returns that I've seen in February, I think we're going to do it again. But when I saw this, I was very excited. I even took another step and zoomed this whole thing all the way back out so we could see what it would look like. We're about 1.5 years before the pandemic, all the way through until now. And I saw this and was like, there's so many stories I could tell with this one slide and this one picture. And the first thing I actually did was send a screenshot to Emily, and she said, you should print that out and put it up on your wall. And that's why this, maybe there's something that we should really talk about here. If we remember the conversations that we were having before the pandemic, especially in the paratransit side, we were seeing such explosive growth that was concerning. How were we going to manage this growth? What were we going to do? Each month it was between 10 and 20%. That doesn't even really, or this chart doesn't explain how quickly that growth was coming. We saw it also on fixed route, where we were jumping between 0% upwards of 10%. The pandemic happened, everything sort of bottoms out, and we kept talking about, well, what's the bounce back going to be? How's the economy going to react? And like every month, I would come and we would talk about this, and I would say, this is the best that we've done since the pandemic. This is the best that I feel like I've said that month in and month out, and this sort of shows that trend of how we slowly but surely kept moving forward until we hit, we're still not where we want to be, but this is a time, I think, to reflect on how far we've come. And, you know, we were dealt the same hand that other transit agencies in the country have been dealt. We've had labor shortages. We've had parts supply issues to make sure our vehicles are properly cared for. We had the same economic interruptions in other places in the country. But to see the team lift of how we managed through all that, I would say that every agency in the country would trade places with where we are. I mean, I think that's something to really be proud of. And not only that, we've positioned ourselves for the future with the grant wins that we've had in terms of our facilities, in terms of our vehicles, bus stops, those, the improvements that we've made there. So,
I would really hand it to our operations and our maintenance departments, who don't get a lot of glory day in and day out, but do the lion's share of the work that we're all here to talk about. And, you know, our operations department has managed to bring us here, and our maintenance department has brought us here despite, you know, all those challenges, despite labor shortages, despite, trading buses off routes because there's parts issues or maintenance issues, or we have people working overtime. So, you know, we get to come and talk about it, but we aren't the ones that are doing the hardest part of the work. So congratulations to those two departments. And also to Steve Rohde and our training department, and John Givens, who is not here, is enjoying a well-deserved vacation. But we've done a lot of training over the last 2 to 3 years, kind of nonstop. And unfortunately, probably won't slow down, but that is, that's a really big lift to get us to this point as well. So thank you. Thanks to all of you.
and so the next question, of course, is, well, where is the ridership coming from, and how is that, how does that play out? And I've done some digging into that. We have seen some strong increases on campus, but also our core routes. I have a few notes here to mention. Route 12 was our biggest increase from January last year to January this year of 85%. Route 4 was second with 68%.
Brad, tell us what those routes are.
I'm sorry?
Tell us where those routes are.
Route 12 is Leestown Road. Route 4 is Newtown. Our lowest increase of a core route would be Route 1 Woodhill at 12%. If we drill down even further, our shopping centers, we've seen a really strong increase there. Two of our busiest stops, Nichols Park and North Park. Nichols Park was up 27%, North Park 77%.
There is a Walmart at both those locations.
Walmart at both of those locations, and then grocery locations. I've got Leestown, Alexandria, and Beaumont Circle, the three stops that serve Kroger. Leestown 150%, Alexandria 21%, and Beaumont 104%. Interesting note on Route 22 Mercer Road. That was a route that was quite resilient through the pandemic. It certainly took a step back, but not quite to the extent of some of our other routes. You see a lot of industry there, Amazon, UPS, those types of places. Was up 37%. So I think some of that additional activity around those manufacturing centers. Also a note, a similar location at Citation in Georgetown, where we have an industrial park, up 194%. So all across the board, there's a whole lot of good stories to tell. Dr. Acapo, I had one in here for him. BCTC at 4th Street, Newtown, 192%. So really, really, really cool stuff. And I had so much fun to dig around and find all this stuff out. But that's a me problem, I think, more than anything else. So yeah, our productivity, again, ridership at nearly 311,000 is fantastic. 12,000 on paratransit. Our total revenue miles and hours are about what we would expect. A little bit lower in paratransit, but that's more related to the number of trips. And our productivity up on fixed route and right there where it has been on paratransit. On safety, our preventable accidents looks really good on fixed route. We were a little bit ahead of where we had been on paratransit. Injury frequency rate is still a bit stubbornly high, but we think that'll kind of smooth itself out as the year goes on. Everything else, I think, is sort of business as usual. And lastly, in maintenance, nearly 11,000 miles between roll calls. That is a fantastic number. Again, as we talked about, part shortages and things of that nature, that's a very impressive number. And our preventive maintenance inspections are perfect, 59 of 59. So that is what I have to share on the performance report. I'm happy to answer any questions. If not, I'll pass it on to Ms. Hope for our financials.
Do we know why that injury frequency rate is stubbornly staying where it's
That is
at?
more of a John Gibbons question than me.
Okay.
But I do know that the magnitude of that number was 4 in January. So we had 4 injuries.
Okay.
When we report it, the industry standard is in terms of 200 hours worked. We don't work 200 hours in a month. We work something more like 30, 40,000 hours in a month. So that's why the number is 13, but there's only 4 injuries. So
Okay.
We had 4 injuries, but we're basing it, so basically,
I see.
it'd be 30, for 200,000 hours, 13.63 would be per 200,000 hours.
I got you.
We didn't actually have 13 injuries.
I see, okay.
Um,
That makes sense, because
It's alarming.
that's kind of alarming. Okay,
And again, it's that 200,000 hours worked is an industry standard.
Okay.
That's why we use it there.
that helps, thank you.
Fred, when it comes to the shopping center and the grocery stops, and I'm not putting you on the spot for a number, but is it a majority or a minority of our grocery stops that are sort of door-to-door service versus dropping you off on the edge of a frontage road that may be a 400-yard walk to Kroger?
Yeah, I came with numbers in case.
He's ready.
you had
Outstanding.
last second. Anytime that we can build good pedestrian connections is very important. And what comes to mind is something like the Fayette Mall that has a good stop and a good straight pedestrian path in. Leestown, there is okay. It's not the worst pedestrian connection I've seen. So I think that definitely helps with how that's grown. Beaumont is another example. We specifically positioned that stop in a place that we thought pedestrians would have better access to Kroger. So I think we're seeing some of the return on that as well. So that pedestrian connection is important. The people who have to do it will still do it, but it helps people who might have a choice.
Yeah.
There are very few places in town, with one exception being the North Park Walmart, where we have a real front door bus stop, front door drop off. And some of that is for safety reasons, to keep the bus out of a congested parking lot.
Sure.
But in the case of North Park, there's no protected pedestrian access to get them to a bus stop that might be a little bit further away. So
Right.
that is why we are located in that particular spot. And a few years ago, when we considered moving that, we actually heard a lot of feedback from members of the senior community and people that have a disability or mobility limitation of some sort, indicating that they will in fact travel a longer distance by bus to specifically go to that location, so they don't quite have that long walk with groceries
Right.
to get to the store. So
And to give you a sense of magnitude on North Park, the difference between last year and this year in January alone was over 1,100 trips, just at that one stop. So it's one of the busier stops. I mean, campus has busier stops, but of the core system,
Sure.
that's one of the busiest stops.
Could we get a little more update on paratransit and how things are going? I mean, it's trending the right way,
it's trending the right way.
and so just curious on how they're doing with hiring people and that sort of thing.
Every week they are attempting to start training classes, which is what I have shared throughout. I think this past week they had 3 that they anticipated starting on Monday, but there were none. 2 ghosted them. 1 called and had a family emergency and needs to start next week. That is more the exception and not the rule, but just as we see here, when we're starting classes of operators, if we expect 8, there's almost never a time that all 8 show up. So they are continuing to hire. They have had some turnover of existing staff that had been there, that were incumbent employees, I should say. Some of those existing staff that, have separated voluntarily. Some have had to separate involuntarily for various reasons: accidents, attendance, policy, guidance. They are continuing to hire and continuing to make improvements in their on-time performance. We are continuing to learn their system for reporting, EcoLane, which is not the same scheduling software that the previous provider had. So we are learning that system as well, trying to learn the ins and outs to make sure that that we can properly audit the data that is submitted to us, to ensure that we're better keeping our finger on the pulse of what is happening as well. But encouraged by the improvements that we are seeing. Some progress is better than none. We are still very far away from our 90% goal in on-time performance. And I do recognize that, but I don't want to get distracted by the fact that it's so far away that we're overlooking the progress that we are making. So, continue to be encouraged by the progress that we have, but know that we're still talking to them every single day, sometimes multiple times.
Did you see any impact when the Amazon distribution center opened on Newtown Pike? I was listening to a podcast, I think it was last week, and they made a comment that whenever those open, there becomes an issue with bus operators in those communities.
I didn't notice an immediate change on our side. I can't say that necessarily for paratransit. I don't know the answer to that. But given that Amazon has been present in the community for a while and has kind of been a known competitor, it wasn't anything sudden that I noticed, but there may be more to that I just haven't
They
dug
have
into.
a lot of vans that pull out of that place every
A
day.
lot, yes.
Okay, just curious.
If there are no more questions on the
I have a
performance.
couple
Oh,
questions.
go ahead, I'm sorry.
So I'll stick with a paratransit question, just 'cause I was reading an article in the paper, and it said there were a couple other services in town that offer a similar type service.
Mhm.
Those would be at a higher price, or that they would be covered by your insurance?
So, one that you've probably seen in town is FTSB, Federated Transportation Services of the Bluegrass. Offers a very similar service. FTSB in Fayette County is not authorized to provide public transportation. They are the designated Medicaid broker. So when a person's non-emergency medical transportation trips, like going to dialysis or something else, are covered by Medicaid, they can coordinate that trip through FTSB. There may be situations where FTSB provides that person with a Lextran bus pass. So they may still take their trip with us, but the payment is handled elsewhere. So that is the one that is most like paratransit. There is also a service called ITN Bluegrass that is for people with visual impairments. It is not cutaway vehicles, it's all like sedans or personal vehicles. And Emily, correct me if I'm wrong, but all of their drivers are volunteers, is that correct? But that is another type of service that might help fill in some of the gaps. There's also some other buses that you might see in town. You might see a cutaway and think, what is that? Jeslex, Bluegrass Community Action from some of the outlying counties do bring people into Fayette County for connections to our transit system, or dropping them off at doctor's appointments or shopping or other locations that they come to.
What did you say the name of the sight impaired?
ITN Bluegrass.
ITN.
ITN.
Do you think we're losing any long-time customers to our current paratransit using some of these other competitive services, or because you have to have qualifying reasons, probably not?
It would be hard to say definitively, but there are a lot of qualifications or criteria you must meet in order to use FTSB, for example. Just because you receive Medicaid doesn't qualify you. You also, you can't have a vehicle that's registered to anyone in your home, or anybody that lives in your household. You can't have access to a vehicle. So there are a few more things. It's not as if someone who uses one can just hop amongst all of them. And some of the other services that come into Fayette County, for example, if you started your trip in Danville on the Bluegrass Community Action Bus and came to town on that. You could use Lextran once you got here. But if you are a person, you know, that you live in Fayette County and you just happen to see that bus out and about, you can't just go hop on that bus because it's not going to have a lot of destinations here. And most likely you're not going to be going back to Danville. So it's unlikely that we're losing a lot to those alternative services. Sometimes the people that we hear who are doing something else, sometimes they take fixed route instead. Sometimes they're calling an Uber or a Lyft. Sometimes they're, you know, getting a friend. But not, it's not that we hear a lot that they're using one of the other services.
And then I really appreciate them coming and emphasizing their local presence and their local leadership and their local staff.
Yes.
So thank you for having them come do that. And then also just wanted to congratulate, I know it's huge, the numbers that you showed earlier today and the work by the entire team to get there and what that means. I had almost thought that we may not never get there, that we would have a new standard. So congratulations to the entire team on those new numbers. It's really something to take time and celebrate. And then I also see our discourtesies are down from last year, so I wanted to congratulate on that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments? This month we have Stephanie Hoke, our Finance and Purchasing Manager, who is going to deliver our financial report to us. So would like to welcome her. You guys go easy on her.
Please.
I'm teasing. I have full confidence in you, Stephanie. You've been outstanding, so thank you.
Let's go. All right, let's go through the financials. We'll start out with the balance sheet. Operating cash is still looking pretty steady for the year, current year to date. Something I did want to point out was the account receivable. You'll see a bit of a difference between last month and this month for that. That is due to capital funds. And the timing of those funds. So those are just the formula funds that we receive. It's just the timing of when those come. It's a little bit longer this year than what we are used to, but once again, that's just the timing. So that's why you'll see a difference between the accounts receivable from last month and this month. Inventory, I did want to note something on inventory, that does include not only parts inventory, maintenance inventory, but that is also fuel inventory that we take into account as well, and that's considered as inventory. So just something to note on that. Any questions on the balance sheet? We can kind of dig into it on the statement next if you'd like. Okay, this kind of digs into a little bit more. Property taxes, we are pleased to see that those are staying pretty steady with the budget, pretty fairly close to the budget for this year, a little bit over, which is good. Passenger revenue is also up, and that does go into account with what the numbers that Fred presented as far as ridership increasing. Federal funds, once again, that is going to be the difference of timing, formula funds, grant funds, all of that goes into federal funds. That's why you'll see that difference there. I did want to note on the gain and loss on investments, that is just as a reminder, the assets that we received from those such as land and equipment from the closing of the New Markets Tax Credit transaction for the headquarters here. So the assets were part of Lextran real property, and once that closing happened, those did move over for the gain and loss on investment. So those are the assets as far as land and equipment.
So it's not money,
Right.
it's revenue, which
Yes.
is different.
Revenue, correct. We'll move on to expenses. Wages are staying pretty steady, which we like to see, as well as with fringe. Professional services, I know Nikki has mentioned in the past, that is a lot, once again, due to timing. Professional services does include transmission replacements, battery replacements, maintenance, work that is done. So that's why you'll see that difference in the budget for professional services. I'd also like to note Vanpool, you'll see a difference there, and I think Nikki has mentioned this also before, but we have seen an increase in Vanpool. So we are excited about that there's more people that are able to utilize that service for Vanpool. So we are now up to 14 Vanpools. So that's why you'll see a little bit of a difference with the budget with Vanpool for that. So we are
Quite a bit of growth compared to
very
where we
good, very good
were
growth.
this time a year ago.
At one point, it was down to, I believe, like
4.
four van pools. So we're really happy to see that growth in that program.
How many is there?
Are there consistent locations? I know people go to Frankfurt. Is it primarily Frankfurt and Georgetown?
Frankfurt, Georgetown, there are some in Madison County. So as a reminder, in order to participate in the van pool, you'd either need to be starting in Fayette County, or this is your destination. So you could come from another location. So I do know a couple of times we've had some vans that come from Madison County, and the folks come here to either the same job site or one that's within close proximity.
UK has one, right?
Mm-hmm.
Out of Madison.
Out of Madison County. There have been some that go to Frankfurt. The Federal Medical Center here was a destination, may still be as part of the van pool program at one point too. But if ever you've seen a van around town that might have the Lextran logo in conjunction with Commute with Enterprise, that's what that is.
Yeah.
It's part of the van pool program. It's not huge, and it's not, it's not something that we talk about as much as we should, but it is a smaller group of people that would be eligible or interested in being able to use that program.
That's great. I had not thought about trips that end here,
Mm-hmm.
coming from other places. So it's-
What do we charge per ride, or is it a monthly fee? Or?
There's a monthly fee,
Pass.
and the payment is coordinated through Enterprise. So we have a third party that works it out. But the way Lextran supports it is we provide a subsidy for people who are participating in the program that we help run. That way we can count those ridership numbers to what we report to the federal government.
Gotcha.
And I think our subsidy is $300 per van
Yes.
or vehicle.
Per
It's not
vehicle.
always a van, but it holds the capacity of that size.
Gotcha. Thanks.
Did we change anything about how we market or message that service that may have led to this increase in usage?
Not necessarily. Enterprise is in charge of marketing and
Okay.
recruiting and getting the word out, and so they've done a really good job. We actually had someone reach out to us recently requesting how to get a hold of them to get more information on van pools. So I don't know if maybe they're seeing more of the vehicles and or just able to talk to more people about it, more companies about it. But yeah, it's definitely increasing. And the vehicles, I'll say, how the van pool works is there's usually one person that is in charge of that van. So they maintain that van or vehicle, So it's not necessarily like a separate individual, it's one person is in charge of that van pool and maintains the vehicle.
So if us as a group did the van pool together, you might serve as the coordinator. And,
Yes.
And take on the responsibility of always fueling the vehicle or taking it in for maintenance.
Harding would definitely be the.
Harding would do that.
You would be our captain.
And a lot of I don't know if this is still happening, but frequently,
right beside it.
historically, I should say, as part of the program, the van pool coordinator amongst the group would receive a discount for providing that service to the group.
How many van pools did you say we're up to?
We're up to 14 right now.
Yeah, nice.
So yes, we're happy to see that increase. It is an increase in subsidy amount, but it's also really good that we're having that ridership for that
So we
program.
get to count the numbers, but there's no passenger revenue that comes from it.
Correct.
Interesting.
If growth continued, there may be some associated revenue on the federal side that we would see
Based on ridership.
based on the ridership number. But one thing that is important about the van pool program is that it does allow us to be somewhat regional, provide some taste of regional transportation, and it would also be a good kind of foundation or base of information for us to say, look, there appears to be some demand in Franklin County or Woodford County, Madison. Let's see what other service delivery might work. Any other questions for Stephanie?
Stephanie, I have a question on wages. I also see on the hiring and recruiting report, we have 30 open positions. When we budget for wages, would that include all of these 30 open positions as if those were fully staffed and budgeted for?
Correct.
The number, what I should add about that number with operators is that number is up from last month. And it may not necessarily properly align with the number of operators that are in the budget. However, someone can go on leave here. An operator can go on leave and remain on leave, what is it, 18 months per our collective bargaining agreement. They would not be getting paid for the duration of that time. However, they're holding a seat. And that is a position that we need to fill. So they might technically be budgeted, their spot is budgeted, but they're not providing any work for us on a day-to-day basis, so we need to fill that. So, you know, I don't want to cause huge alarm and think if we all of a sudden fill 30 positions, we're drastically over budget.
That's where I was going.
Right. And also, I would love to have a magic wand and be able to hire 30 people tomorrow, but as you've all seen over the pace of the last 2 years, that is a little bit slower going.
We do budget for turnover, and I will say that that does kind of go hand in hand as well with overtime. So once we budget for that turnover, but once we have more operators in those positions, most of the time you will see the overtime decrease because we aren't needing it as much as what we would if we had a shortage or needed the operator. So
Yeah.
both of those kind of go hand in hand with the budgeting of it and the turnover and the overtime.
Thank you both for that. And then we do expect state funds, right, and I know we didn't budget for any, but I think we've discussed some state funds will come in.
Yeah, and it actually should be coming in fairly soon. So that might show up, I'm not sure, maybe next month or possibly the one after that, but that is coming soon. I know there was a little bit of a timing, again, on that.
There was some timing
delay.
and also there was a change in the process of what the state needed from us to turn into them in order to get that back. That was different from years past. So that has been a little more labor intensive and time intensive to get all the documentation from them, for them, that they require.
Thank you. And then we still haven't made a budget amendment for paratransit expenses, correct?
Correct. And we will
Need to do that.
reschedule our
Okay.
finance committee meeting as soon as we are able to do that.
Okay.
And that might also be something I believe we could look at when we review the budget for next year too, as well, possibly.
Yeah, I would guess we would put the number we now have and know in next year's budget versus an estimate.
Sure.
Yeah. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you very
Alright.
much.
All right, there is one action item this month, Resolution 2023-02, Contract for Environmental Services.
Yes, thank you. We do have our second resolution of the year, our contract, resolution to award a contract for environmental services. We issued an RFP at the end of, near the end of 2022 and received 4 qualified and responsive proposals from the firms you see listed in your board packet. Recommended for contract award today is WSP. You have probably heard their name before from some other things that we've worked with that firm on. One thing I do want to note is WSP is not the name of the firm that we currently work with for environmental, but it is the same group. Currently we work with Wood Environmental, who is owned by, correct me if I'm wrong, Stephanie, was owned by Amec Foster Wheeler. That group was purchased or acquired by WSP. So, they have absorbed that group and Woods here locally, which just means that WSP has expanded their presence and their offerings in the Lexington area. And they will do things for us like stormwater sampling, sanitary sewer sampling. They've also given us their rates for some general environmental consulting that we are likely to need as we move into some of our canopy work and CNG work. We wanted to make sure that we had that built in and had those rates available. The source of funds for this contract will be our local mass transit funds. And the term of the contract that we're recommending is for 3 years with 2 additional options for 1 year at a time for a total of 5 possible years. That is the information that I wanted to share with you today related to environmental services, and would be happy to try to answer any questions in conjunction with Chris Withrow, our Director of Maintenance.
I'll make a motion to approve.
Ms. Motley makes a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Ms. Rogers, thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
All right, thank you, Board.
Is there any new business?
I do not have any new business at this time.
Okay. You want to tell us about the proposed agenda items for next month?
Yes, we do have a handful of resolutions for next month, one including for voice over IP services, which was expected for this month, but we've deferred that to allow some more time to interview those firms. We also expect resolutions for IT services, electrician services, and van pool services, as we talked about a little bit earlier.
All
Those are
right.
the known agenda items at this time. Could be a budget amendment for the full board if we get our finance committee together before that time, but that's unknown at this moment.
Any need for closed session?
I do not have a need for closed session.
All right. Then we stand adjourned. Thank you so much, everyone. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.